The message arrived on a Tuesday morning, which Lee Minho thought was fitting because Tuesdays were always when bad things happened to him. He sat in his small office on Earth's Outer Colonies Division headquarters, sipping his third coffee of the day and reviewing trade documents, when his supervisor walked in with a strange expression on her face. Park Ji-won was normally unshakable, but today she looked almost nervous. "Minho, we need to talk," she said, closing the door behind her. Minho set down his coffee. "Did I mess up the Centauri contract again?" "No, nothing like that." Ji-won sat down across from him. "You've been selected for a special assignment." "Special how?" Ji-won pulled out a data tablet and slid it across the desk. On the screen was an image that made Minho's stomach drop. A massive crystalline being, easily 12 feet tall with a body that seemed to be made of living diamond. Its face was angular and sharp, and its eyes glowed with an inner light. "This is Emperor Kralix of the Vorthon Empire," Ji-won explained. "He rules 47 star systems and commands the largest military fleet in the Outer Rim." "Okay," Minho said slowly. "And what does he want with me?" "He's issued a challenge to every species in the known galaxy. He wants each civilization to send their strongest representative to his court. Those who prove themselves worthy will be granted trade agreements and military alliances. Those who fail will be cast into something called the Pit of Shame." Minho stared at her. Then he looked down at himself. He was 5'10" on a good day. He had the build of someone who sat at a desk for most of his life. His biggest physical achievement was climbing 4 flights of stairs without getting winded. "And you want to send me?" "The invitation specifically said strong," Ji-won said. "Our translation team interpreted this as strong in mind and spirit. You speak 47 languages, Minho. You've negotiated 12 successful trade agreements. You understand alien cultures better than anyone else in the department." "But what if they mean physically strong?" Minho asked, his voice rising slightly. "What if they want someone who can lift heavy things or fight or—" "Then we'll deal with it," Ji-won interrupted. "Look, every other department passed on this. They think it's too risky. But I believe in you. You're adaptable. You're smart. You can handle this." Minho wanted to argue, but he could see the determination in Ji-won's eyes. She had given him his job when no one else would. She had believed in him when he was just a kid from Busan, with a talent for languages and no real prospects. He owed her. "When do I leave?" he asked quietly. "Tomorrow morning. You'll travel on the Soul's Pride. It's a 3-week journey to Vorthis Prime." That night, Minho packed his bags with shaking hands. He included his diplomatic dress uniform, his data pad with cultural files on the Vorthon Empire, and an entire box of tissues. His allergies had been acting up lately, probably from the recycled air in his apartment building. His mother called just as he was finishing. "Minho, your supervisor told me about the assignment." "Are you sure about this?" "Not really, Mom," he admitted. "But it's my job." "You always were too responsible for your own good," she said, but her voice was warm. "Be careful. And take your allergy medicine?" "I will. And eat properly. Those spaceships never have decent kimchi." "Mom, I'm just saying. You get sick when you don't eat well." After he hung up, Minho looked at himself in the mirror. He looked tired. His eyes were slightly red from allergies. His hair stuck up in odd directions. He definitely did not look like someone who should represent humanity before an alien emperor who valued strength. But orders were orders. The next morning, he boarded the Soul's Pride. The ship was small by military standards, designed for diplomatic missions rather than combat. The crew was friendly but clearly confused about why they were transporting a single diplomat to meet a warrior emperor. Captain Han Soman, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, met him in the cargo bay. "Mr. Lee, welcome aboard. Your quarters are on deck 3. We'll be departing in an hour." "Thank you, Captain." "I'll be honest with you," she said, lowering her voice. "I've seen the briefings on this Emperor Kralix. He's not someone who appreciates diplomacy. He respects power. Physical power." "I know," Minho said. "So why are you going?" "Because someone has to." The captain studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Brave, stupid, but brave. I respect that." The journey took 3 weeks, just as Ji-won had promised. Minho spent most of his time in his quarters, studying everything he could about the Vorthon Empire. He learned that they were an ancient race existing for over 10,000 years. They valued strength above all else. Their warriors trained from childhood to master combat. Their architecture was built from materials that could withstand planetary bombardment. He also watched holographic recordings of previous court presentations. They were not encouraging. In one recording, a massive creature called a Krellian warbeast attempted to arm wrestle the Emperor. The warbeast had arms like tree trunks and muscles that rippled beneath scaled skin. It lost within 30 seconds, its arm bent backward with a sickening crack. In another, a champion from the Thulgarian system tried to lift the Emperor's throne. The throne was apparently made from compressed neutron star material and was impossibly heavy. The Thulgarian managed to get it an inch off the ground before collapsing. Every recording ended the same way, the Emperor declaring the challenger unworthy. Minho's nose started running in the second week. He told himself it was just the recycled air on the ship. Space vessels always did this to him, but by the third week he was going through tissues at an alarming rate. His sinuses felt congested, and there was a constant pressure behind his eyes. "Are you feeling all right?" Captain Han asked him one day in the mess hall. "Just allergies," Minho said, dabbing at his nose with a tissue. "They always get worse on ships. Maybe you should see the medic." "I'll be fine." But he wasn't fine. The pressure in his head was building. It felt like every breath was a struggle. His eyes watered constantly. He went through his entire supply of tissues and had to borrow more from the ship's stores. On the final day of the journey, Minho stood at the observation window and watched as Vorthus Prime came into view. The planet was massive, easily twice the size of Earth. Its surface glittered with crystalline structures that caught the light from its sun. In orbit around the planet were dozens of warships, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built. "We're approaching the Imperial Palace now," the ship's computer announced. "Prepare for landing." Minho's hands were shaking. He wiped his nose again and straightened his uniform. In a few hours he would stand before Emperor Kralix and his court. He would be surrounded by warriors and champions from across the galaxy, beings who could crush steel with their bare hands. And he would be there with nothing but his wits, his languages, and a terrible case of allergies. "This is such a bad idea," he muttered to himself. But it was too late to turn back now. The soul's pride descended through the atmosphere and Minho's fate was sealed. He took a deep breath, winced at the pressure in his sinuses, and prepared to meet his destiny. Whatever that destiny might be. The Imperial Palace was carved from a single planetary core, or so the guide had told Minho as they walked through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. The walls were made of some kind of crystal that pulsed with internal light, and every surface was smooth and perfect. No seams, no joints, just endless flowing stone that looked like frozen water. Minho's shoes clicked against the floor, the sound echoing in the vast space. His nose was still running and he had already gone through half a pack of tissues. The pressure in his head had gotten worse since landing. Maybe it was the gravity, which was slightly higher than Earth's, or maybe it was just his terrible luck. Ambassador Cho Myung from the diplomatic escort walked beside him. She was older than Ji-won, with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Remember," she said quietly, "be respectful but confident. Show no fear." "Easy for you to say," Minho muttered, wiping his nose again. "You're not the one who has to stand in front of him." "No, but I have to watch. And file the report if things go badly." "That's not encouraging." They reached a massive door, easily 50 feet tall, carved with images of battles and conquests. 2 Vorthan guards stood on either side, their crystalline bodies reflecting the light in rainbow patterns. They were even bigger up close than Minho had imagined, towering over him like buildings. One of the guards looked down at him. Its voice was like rocks grinding together. "The human representative." "Yes," Minho said, trying to keep his voice steady. "The Emperor awaits, enter." The doors swung open and Minho's breath caught in his throat. The throne room was enormous. The ceiling stretched up so high he could barely see it. Massive pillars carved from single pieces of crystal supported archways that defied physics. And everywhere, standing or sitting or floating, were the champions of the galaxy. Minho saw creatures he had only read about in files. The Halgrim Crushers with their 8 arms and bodies covered in armored plates. The Peronian Warborn, beings of living plasma contained in energy fields that crackled with power. The Skaldran Titanforged, half organic and half machine with weapons built into their very bodies. And there at the far end of the room on a raised platform sat Emperor Kralix on his throne. The throne itself was unlike anything Minho had ever seen. It was made from some dark material that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The space around it seemed to shimmer and bend, as if reality itself was having trouble near the throne. Minho realized with a start that it must be incredibly dense enough to have its own gravitational field. The Emperor was even more impressive in person, 12 feet of living crystal, with edges sharp enough to cut and a presence that filled the room. His eyes glowed with a cold blue light as he surveyed the assembled champions. "Another arrives," the Emperor's voice boomed through the hall. It wasn't loud exactly, but it resonated in a way that made Minho's bones vibrate. "Step forward and be recognized." Minho walked forward on legs that felt like they might give out at any moment. Every step was harder than the last as he got closer to the throne. The gravitational field was pulling at him, making his body feel heavier with each meter. He stopped at what he hoped was a respectful distance and bowed. "Emperor Kralix, I am Lee Minho, representative of Earth and humanity. It is an honor to—" Laughter cut him off, not from the Emperor but from the assembled champions. The sound echoed through the hall, harsh and mocking. "This is what Earth sends?" one of the Halgrim Crushers called out. "This soft creature who can barely stand in the gravity field?" "Look at it," a Pyronian added, its voice crackling like fire. "It's already struggling and the tests haven't even begun." Minho felt his face burning with embarrassment. He wiped his nose again, which only made the laughter grow louder. Emperor Kralix raised one massive hand and the laughter stopped immediately. The Emperor leaned forward on his throne, studying Minho with those glowing eyes. "Tell me, human," the Emperor said, "why did your species send you? Where are your warriors? Your champions? You're strong?" Minho swallowed hard. His prepared speech about diplomatic strength and cultural understanding suddenly seemed very stupid. "Ice Earth values many kinds of strength, Your Majesty. I was sent because—" Silence. The Emperor's voice was not angry, just disappointed. "I have no interest in excuses. You are here. You will be tested like all the others. If you prove worthy, Earth will have its place in my court. If not, you will be cast into the pit of shame." "I understand," Minho said, though he really didn't. "Good. Watch now. See what strength truly means." For the next 2 hours, Minho watched as champions were called forward one by one. Each test was designed to break them, to push them beyond their limits. A Halgrim Crusher was given a steel beam as thick as Minho's torso. With all 8 arms, the creature bent it into a perfect circle, the metal screaming as it deformed. The Emperor nodded in approval. A Skaldron Titanforged was told to withstand the throne's gravity field. The warrior marched forward, step by agonizing step, until it stood directly before the throne. It remained there for 3 full minutes, its metal body straining before finally collapsing backward. The Emperor called it adequate. A Pyronian warborn was given a block of ice the size of a house. With a touch, the creature turned it into steam, the water vapor filling the hall with mist. The Emperor seemed pleased. Each test was more impressive than the last. Each champion displayed power that Minho couldn't even dream of possessing. His nose was getting worse. The pressure in his sinuses was building to unbearable levels. His eyes were watering so badly he could barely see. He reached for another tissue and realized with horror that he had used the last one. "Human," the Emperor's voice cut through his panic. "You are the last. Come forward." Minho walked toward the throne, each step harder than before. The gravitational field pressed down on him like a physical weight. His bones felt like they might crack. His lungs struggled to draw breath. The pressure in his head was becoming unbearable. He made it to the base of the platform and stopped. He couldn't go any further. He looked up at the Emperor, who stared down at him with what might have been curiosity or might have been contempt. "Well?" the Emperor said. "Show us your strength, human. Prove that you deserve to stand in my court." Minho tried to speak. He wanted to explain that humans had different strengths, that they valued intelligence and adaptability and cooperation. He wanted to talk about the 12 trade agreements he had negotiated, the wars he had helped prevent, the bridges he had built between species. But he couldn't speak. His nose was completely congested. His eyes were streaming. The pressure in his sinuses had reached a critical point. And then he felt it. The sneeze, building up like a storm inside his head. He tried to stop it. He tried to hold it back. He pressed his hand against his nose and squeezed his eyes shut. But it was no use. The sneeze was coming and there was nothing he could do to stop it. "Human?" The Emperor's voice seemed to come from very far away. "What are you?" Minho sneezed. It was not a polite sneeze. It was not a quiet sneeze. It was the kind of sneeze that had been building for 3 weeks of space travel and allergies and stress. It was the kind of sneeze that felt like it might turn his skull inside out. The sound echoed through the throne room like a thunderclap, and then everything went wrong. Later, when scientists tried to reconstruct what happened in that moment, they would argue for months about the exact sequence of events. Some said the sneeze created a pressure wave that interacted with the gravitational field in unexpected ways. Others claimed it was the speed of the expelled air, combined with the unique atmospheric composition of the throne room. A few radical theorists suggested it was pure chance, a 1 in a trillion alignment of factors that could never be repeated. But in that moment, Minho wasn't thinking about science or physics or probability. He was thinking that he had just sneezed in front of an alien emperor, and he was probably going to die. The sneeze itself lasted less than a second. The air rushed out of his nose and mouth at nearly 100 miles per hour, carrying with it all the pressure that had been building in his sinuses for 3 weeks. In Earth's atmosphere, it would have been just another sneeze. Loud, messy, embarrassing, but ultimately harmless. But this wasn't Earth. The throne room had been carefully designed with specific atmospheric pressure and gravity fields. Everything was balanced, calculated, perfect. The Vorthan engineers had spent centuries refining the environment to showcase the Emperor's power. The gravitational field around the throne was particularly complex, bending space itself to demonstrate dominance. Minho's sneeze hit that delicate balance like a hammer hitting glass. The pressure wave expanded outward in a perfect sphere. For a fraction of a second, it pushed against the gravitational field. The two forces met, canceled each other out, and then something strange happened. They multiplied. The shock wave doubled in strength, then tripled. The air in the throne room began to vibrate at frequencies that made no sense. The carefully maintained atmospheric pressure fluctuated wildly, and then the shock wave hit the throne. The throne of dominance had stood for 10,000 years. It had survived wars, bombardments, and the tests of countless champions. It was made from compressed neutron star material, one of the densest substances in the known universe. According to every law of physics, it should have been indestructible, but no one had ever sneezed at it before. The sound started as a small crack like ice breaking on a frozen lake. Then it grew louder. The dark material of the throne began to fracture, hairline cracks spreading across its surface like lightning. The cracks glowed with a strange light, as if the compressed matter inside was trying to escape. Emperor Kralik stood up from his throne, his crystalline face showing something that might have been shock. He didn't finish the sentence. The throne exploded. There was no other word for it. 10,000 years of compressed matter released all at once in a catastrophic failure. The throne didn't just break or crack or crumble. It shattered into 1,000,000 pieces, each piece flying outward with tremendous force. The gravitational field collapsed instantly. The sudden change in pressure created a secondary shock wave that radiated through the entire throne room. 3 of the massive support pillars developed cracks. A 200-foot crystalline window on the far wall exploded outward, showering the courtyard outside with glittering fragments. Champions were thrown to the floor. The Halgrim crusher that had mocked Minho earlier was knocked backward by a flying piece of throne material, its armored plates denting from the impact. A Pyronian Warborn's energy field flickered and almost failed. Even the Skaldron Titan Forged, with all their mechanical enhancements, struggled to keep their footing. Emperor Kralix himself was thrown backward off his platform. He landed on the floor with a crash that echoed through the hall, his crystalline body leaving cracks in the stone, and then silence. Complete, absolute silence. Minho stood exactly where he had been, tissue halfway to his nose, frozen in horror. His legs felt like they might give out. His heart was pounding so hard he thought it might explode. His mind was trying to process what had just happened but kept hitting a wall of pure disbelief. He had sneezed and destroyed the Emperor's throne. The throne that had stood for 10,000 years. The throne made from neutron star material. The throne that countless champions had tried and failed to even lift. Destroyed by a sneeze. "Oh no," Minho whispered. "Oh no, 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 no." Emperor Kralix rose slowly from the floor. Pieces of his throne lay scattered around him, still glowing with residual energy. His crystalline body was unmarked, but his posture had changed. He wasn't standing with the confident dominance he had shown before. He was standing like someone who had just witnessed something impossible. The Emperor turned to look at Minho, those glowing blue eyes fixed on him with an intensity that made Minho want to disappear into the floor. Guards, the Emperor said, his voice strangely quiet. Surround the human. Do not harm him. I must understand. 12 Vorthon guards materialized from alcoves around the throne room. They formed a circle around Minho, their massive forms blocking any escape route. But they kept their distance, Minho noticed. They were afraid of him, of what he might do. The absurdity of it would have made him laugh if he wasn't so terrified. Human, Emperor Kralik said, walking slowly toward him. Each step left small cracks in the floor. What are you? I'm just a diplomat, Minho said, his voice coming out as a squeak. I'm so sorry, Your Majesty. I didn't mean to. I have allergies and the pressure was building and… Allergies? The Emperor repeated the word like it was in a foreign language. What are allergies? It's a condition where your body reacts to things in the environment. Dust, pollen, recycled air. It makes you sneeze and… Minho gestured helplessly at the ruins of the throne. And apparently this. The Emperor stared at him for a long moment. Then he turned to one of his guards. Bring me the human's companion, the one who came with the diplomatic vessel. Your Majesty… Minho started to protest, but the guard was already leaving. 5 minutes later, Ambassador Cho Myung was escorted into the throne room. She looked around at the destruction with wide eyes, then at Minho, then back at the ruins of the throne. Her expression went through several rapid changes before settling on something that might have been impressed. Minho, she said carefully, what did you do? I sneezed, he said miserably. You sneezed. Yes. And that? She gestured at the scattered pieces of throne. Happened? Yes. Myung turned to the Emperor and bowed deeply. Your Majesty, I apologize for any… Do not apologize, the Emperor interrupted. Explain. Is this normal for humans? Can all of your kind do this? Well, Myung said slowly, all humans can sneeze, yes. But I don't think all humans can destroy thrones made of neutron star material. That's somewhat unusual. Somewhat, the Emperor repeated flatly. An uncomfortable silence fell over the throne room. The other champions were picking themselves up off the floor, staring at Minho with expressions ranging from fear to confusion to anger. The Halgrim crusher that had mocked him earlier was giving him a very wide berth. Emperor Kralix walked back to where his throne had been. He looked down at the empty platform, at the scattered pieces of compressed matter that had once been a symbol of his power. Then he looked back at Minho, and something in his expression had changed. I have ruled this empire for 300 years, the Emperor said quietly. In that time I have faced armies. I have battled champions from 1,000 worlds. I have seen demonstrations of power that would make lesser beings weep, and not once, not ever, has anyone managed to do what you just did. I'm really sorry, Minho said again because he didn't know what else to say. You destroyed my throne, the Emperor continued. The throne that has stood since before your species learned to walk upright. The throne that survived planetary bombardments and antimatter weapons. You destroyed it with a sneeze. Yes, Your Majesty. The Emperor was quiet for another moment. Then he did something no one expected. He laughed. The Emperor's laughter started as a low rumble, like rocks shifting deep underground. Then it grew louder, echoing through the ruined throne room until every surface vibrated with the sound. The assembled champions looked at each other in confusion. Some of the guards took an uncertain step back. Ambassador Cho looked like she was trying very hard to understand what was happening. Minho just stood there still holding his tissue, wondering if he had somehow broken reality along with the throne. Fascinating, the Emperor said, finally bringing his laughter under control. Absolutely fascinating. In all my years I have never encountered anything like this. Your Majesty, one of the guards ventured cautiously, should we not punish the human for this destruction? Punish? Emperor Kralix turned to look at the guard. For what? For showing us something we never knew existed? For demonstrating that our understanding of strength is incomplete? He turned back to Minho. No, we will not punish. We will learn. He raised his voice to address the entire room. Clear the hall. I want everyone out except the human and his companion, and send for my science advisors. All of them. Immediately. The champions filed out slowly, many of them still staring at Minho as they left. The Helgrim Crusher gave him a respectful nod, which was quite different from the mockery of an hour ago. Within 10 minutes, the throne room was empty except for Minho, Ambassador Cho, the Emperor, and 3 Vorthan guards who stood at a very respectful distance. Now, the Emperor said, sitting down on the edge of his platform where his throne had been. It was strange to see him at a more normal height. Tell me everything about human biology. Start with these allergies, Minho explained as best he could. He talked about pollen and dust and how the human immune system sometimes overreacted to harmless substances. He described the pressure that built up in the sinuses and the explosive release of air that was a sneeze. He went into perhaps too much detail about mucus and irritation and all the embarrassing things that came with having allergies. The Emperor listened with intense focus, occasionally asking questions that revealed a deep understanding of physics and biology. Despite his warrior appearance, Kralix was clearly a scholar at heart. And this happens to all humans? The Emperor asked. Not all, Minho said. Maybe 30% have allergies. But all humans can sneeze. It's a reflex to expel irritants from the nose. A biological pressure weapon, the Emperor mused. Built into every member of your species, remarkable. I wouldn't call it a weapon, Minho said. It's more of an inconvenience. You destroyed my throne with an inconvenience. I really am sorry about that. The Emperor waved a hand dismissively. Do not apologize again. I am not angry. I am intrigued. The science advisors arrived then, a group of 5 Vorthans who looked less like warriors and more like the scholars they were. They examined the remains of the throne with instruments that hummed and beeped. They took readings of the air composition and the residual energy patterns. They argued with each other in rapid Vorthan that even Minho's translation implant struggled to follow. Finally, the lead advisor approached the Emperor. Your Majesty, we have preliminary findings. Speak. The throne's destruction was caused by a cascading failure of the gravitational containment field. The initial pressure wave from the human sneeze created a resonance frequency that the throne's material could not absorb. Instead of dispersing the energy, the structure amplified it. The result was catastrophic structural collapse. In simpler terms? The Emperor asked. The throne was too perfect, Your Majesty. It was designed to withstand massive direct force. But this was not direct force. This was something small, fast, and chaotic. The throne could not adapt, so it broke. The Emperor was silent for a long moment. You're saying my throne's greatest weakness was that it was too strong? In a manner of speaking, yes. The Emperor looked at Minho with what might have been respect. What else about humans is dangerous in this way? Minho glanced at Ambassador Cho, who gave him a small nod. Well, Your Majesty, quite a lot, actually. Over the next hour, they explained. Cho had called for Kim Yuna, the xenobiologist from the Soul's Pride, and she arrived with data files and medical reports that she displayed on holographic screens. Yuna was younger than Minho, maybe 25, with short hair and an enthusiasm for her subject that bordered on manic. She had been excited about the diplomatic mission from the start, seeing it as a chance to study alien biology. Now she was practically vibrating with energy. Humans are weird, she announced to the Emperor without any preamble. I mean that in the most scientific way possible. We evolved on a planet that was actively trying to kill us. She pulled up images of Earth, showing the various bacteria and viruses and parasites that existed there. Our world is absolutely full of diseases. We have thousands of different pathogens that can infect us, so our immune system evolved to be incredibly aggressive. How aggressive? The Emperor asked. Well, for example, human blood is slightly acidic to most species. If a human bleeds on certain alien materials, it can corrode them. Our stomach acid can dissolve metal. Our immune cells attack anything foreign with extreme prejudice. The Emperor's advisors were taking notes frantically. And that's not even the interesting part, Yuna continued. She was enjoying this, Minho realized. Humans have this thing called a fever. When we get infected, our body deliberately raises its temperature to kill the pathogen. We make ourselves sick to cure ourselves. Most species find that horrifying. It is unusual, the Emperor admitted. Oh, it gets better. Humans can also voluntarily hold their breath until we pass out. We can force our bodies to do things that should be impossible through sheer willpower. We have this thing called adrenaline that temporarily makes us stronger, faster, and more resistant to pain. We can ignore injuries that would incapacitate other species and just keep going. You're describing a species designed for survival, one of the advisors said. Exactly. Yuna beamed. Humans aren't strong like Vorthons are strong. We can't bend steel or withstand gravity fields, but we're adaptable. We survive. We're like biological cockroaches, except we also build spaceships and write poetry. And sneeze. the Emperor added dryly. And sneeze, Yuna agreed. That's just one example of how our defense mechanisms can have unexpected effects. Human biology is full of things like that. We cry when we're sad, but also when we cut onions because onions release chemicals that irritate our eyes. We vomit when we eat bad food, but the force of vomiting can break ribs. We have built-in self-destruct mechanisms that are supposed to protect us but can also hurt us. The Emperor stood and walked to the window, looking out at his empire. The other champions had gathered in the courtyard below, talking in groups and occasionally pointing up at the broken window. I have been thinking about strength all wrong, he said finally. I built my empire on the idea that power comes from being the strongest, the most durable, the most forceful. But the human is weak by every measure I use. He can barely stand in my gravity field. He could not bend steel or lift my throne, and yet he destroyed that throne with a sneeze. He turned back to face them. What does that mean? It means strength comes in many forms, Ambassador Cho said quietly. Physical power is one type, but adaptability, intelligence, unpredictability, these are also strengths, perhaps more important ones. My empire has been fighting the same wars for centuries, the Emperor said. We fight the Skaldran, who are also strong. We fight the Peronians, who are also powerful. And we never win decisively because we are all using the same strategies, the same measures of worth. We have become predictable. Yes, Cho agreed. But humans are not predictable. The Emperor looked at Minho. No one could have predicted what you would do. No defense could have been prepared. You won not through strength but through being completely unexpected. I wouldn't say I won, Minho said. I just sneezed. You destroyed my throne. I would call that winning. The Emperor paced back and forth, his crystalline body reflecting the light in shifting patterns. His advisors watched him nervously. Finally, he stopped and turned to face the humans. I have a proposal, he said. But first I need more information. Tell me, Ambassador Cho, what does Earth want from this meeting? Trade agreements, Cho said promptly. Access to your markets and technology. Safe passage through Vorthan space for our ships. An alliance, if possible. And what would Earth offer in return? Cho smiled. That depends on what you need, Your Majesty. The Emperor looked at the broken throne, at the cracked pillars, at the shattered window. Then he looked at Minho, still standing there with his tissue, looking uncomfortable and confused. I think, the Emperor said slowly, that I need exactly what you have already demonstrated. I need the unexpected. 6 months after what became known as the Throne Incident, Minho stood in a newly built classroom on Vorthus Prime and tried to explain why humans cried when cutting onions. So the vegetable releases a chemical, he said, gesturing at the holographic image floating above his desk. And this chemical irritates our eyes. Our eyes then produce tears to wash the chemical away. It's a defense mechanism. One of his students, a young Vortan named Krelva, raised a crystalline hand. Teacher Minho, is it true that this makes humans appear sad even when they are not? Yes, exactly. That seems like a tactical advantage, another student said. You could confuse your enemies by appearing emotionally vulnerable while preparing food. Minho had to stop and think about that. He had never considered crying over onions to be a tactical advantage before. I suppose you could look at it that way, though mostly humans just find it annoying. Humans find many of their biological functions annoying, Krelva observed. This seems inefficient. Welcome to being human, Minho said with a smile. The classroom was part of the new Institute for Human Vorthan Cultural Exchange, which had been built in the months following the throne incident. It was located in one of the palace complexes with windows that looked out over the crystalline gardens. The building was designed to human scale rather than Vorthan scale, which meant Minho didn't have to climb giant stairs every day. After the class ended, Minho gathered his materials and walked toward the Institute's main offices. The corridors were busy with activity. Vorthan scholars hurried past carrying data tablets. Human researchers were deep in conversation with alien scientists. The whole place hummed with energy and discovery. Ambassador Cho Mi-young had negotiated a remarkable deal in the weeks after the incident. Earth got everything it wanted: trade agreements, access to Vorthan markets, safe passage through their space, and access to advanced gravitational technology. In return, Earth provided something the Vorthan Empire desperately needed: a completely different perspective. The formal title was Strategic Advisory Consultants, but everyone just called them the Chaos Division. Minho found Kim Yuna in her laboratory. surrounded by displays showing human and Vorthan biology side by side. She was arguing with a Vorthan scientist about immune responses, both of them gesturing excitedly at the data. "Yuna," Minho called out. "Council meeting in 10 minutes. Already?" She checked the time and swore. Okay. Kralven, we'll finish this later." The Vorthan scientist nodded. "I look forward to it. Your human immune system continues to horrify and fascinate me." "That's the nicest thing anyone said to me all week," Yuna said cheerfully. They walked together toward the council chambers. Yuna had taken to life on Vorthus Prime with enthusiasm. She was happy, Minho thought. She was doing work that excited her, making discoveries that no human had made before. "How are your students?" Yuna asked. "Concerned that humans cry over vegetables," Minho said. "They think it's a military strategy. I mean, it could be if you really think about it. Please don't encourage them." The council chambers had been built in the space where the throne room used to be. After the incident, Emperor Kralix had ordered the entire room renovated. The new design was less imposing and more functional. There were seats of various sizes to accommodate different species. The ceiling was lower, the lighting softer, and at the center, instead of a massive throne made of neutron star material, there was a simple chair. Human-designed, comfortable, and as Yuna had insisted during the design phase, sneeze-proof. Emperor Kralix was already seated when they arrived, along with Park Jiwon, who had been promoted to Earth's chief representative to the Vorthan Empire, and several Vorthan advisors. The Emperor looked different these days. He still had the same crystalline body and imposing presence, but his posture was more relaxed. He smiled more often. "Ah, Minho Yuna," the Emperor said. "Good. We were just discussing the latest report from the joint military exercises." Minho took his seat. The joint exercises had been Park Ji-won's idea. Human military advisors working with Vorthan forces to develop new strategies and tactics. The first few weeks had been rocky, but now things were running smoothly. "How bad was it?" Minho asked. "Depends on your perspective," Ji-won said. "From a Vorthan military standpoint, it was a disaster. From a learning standpoint, it was perfect." One of the Vorthan advisors, a general named Skalmix, spoke up. "The human advisors suggested we practice biological containment during field operations. One of our soldiers developed what humans call a cold. Within 2 days, half the battalion was incapacitated. Human viruses are more aggressive than we anticipated," another advisor added. "We have since implemented strict quarantine protocols." "Which is good," Yuna said. "Because honestly, you don't want to see what happens when the flu gets into an alien population. Trust me on this." "The exercise also revealed gaps in our environmental adaptability," Skalmix continued. "Human soldiers were able to operate in conditions that our forces found challenging. They complained constantly about the discomfort, but they continued to function." "Humans are good at complaining," Minho said. "It's basically our superpower." "It seems to help with morale," the general said seriously. "We are studying the phenomenon." Emperor Kralix leaned back in his chair, his comfortable human-designed chair, and looked around the table. 6 months ago, I believed I understood strength. I believed power came from force, from physical dominance. Then a human sneezed and destroyed my throne. We're never going to live that down, are we?" Minho muttered. "Never," the Emperor agreed cheerfully. "But it taught me something important. Strength is not just about power. It's about adaptability, resilience, the ability to survive and thrive in unexpected circumstances. These are things humans excel at. We also excel at allergies," Minho pointed out. "Yes, and those allergies destroyed a throne that survived planetary bombardment. I call that impressive." Ji-won cleared her throat. "Your Majesty, we've received inquiries from 3 other empires about establishing similar exchange programs. The Peronians are particularly interested after they heard about the cold virus incident." "Are they interested in alliance or in studying our germs?" Yuna asked. "Both, probably." The Emperor considered this. "What do you think, Ambassador Park? Should we share our human chaos consultants with others?" "I think that depends on what you want to achieve," Ji-won said carefully. "If the goal is to change how the galaxy thinks about strength and adaptability, then yes. If the goal is to maintain exclusive advantage, then no." "I have been thinking about this," the Emperor said. "The galaxy has been fighting the same wars in the same ways for too long. We need change. We need new thinking. The humans have shown us that." He stood and walked to the window, looking out over his empire. I propose we establish a Galactic Institute for Strategic Innovation. Based here on Vorthus Prime, open to all species. Humans would lead it, teaching others to think differently. That's ambitious, G1 said, I know. But consider what we have learned in just 6 months. Human military advisors have revolutionized our tactical thinking. Human medical knowledge has improved our health protocols. Human cultural practices have made our people happier. Did you know Vorthan children now enjoy something called story time? I taught them that, Minho said, slightly proud, and they love it. We are becoming a better empire because we learned to value different kinds of strength. The discussion continued for another hour, working through the details of the proposed institute. By the end, they had the outline of an agreement that would change the political landscape of the galaxy. As the meeting broke up, Emperor Kralix asked Minho to stay behind. They stood together at the window, looking out over the palace gardens where Vorthan and human children played together. Tell me honestly, the Emperor said. Do you ever regret coming here? That first day you were terrified. I was, Minho admitted. I thought I was going to die, or be thrown into the pit of shame, which sounded worse than dying. But it worked out. I mean, I destroyed your throne, which I still feel bad about. Stop apologizing for the throne. Right, sorry, I mean not sorry. Minho took a breath. What I mean is, I came here thinking I had to prove humanity was strong in traditional ways. But instead, I learned that being different can be its own kind of strength. That is wise, the Emperor said. Also, I got to teach Vorthan children about Korean folktales, which has been surprisingly fun. They particularly enjoyed the story about the tiger and the persimmon. That's a good one. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Minho's nose started to tickle. He felt the familiar pressure building. Without thinking, he reached for a tissue. Don't worry, the Emperor said, noticing. The new building materials are all reinforced against sudden pressure changes. Your architect friend, Ms. Yuna, was very insistent. She thinks of everything. She does, which is why she will be perfect as the head of the new institute's Biological Sciences Division. Minho sneezed into his tissue, a normal, non-destructive sneeze. You're offering her a permanent position? I'm offering all of you permanent positions if you want them. Earth will always be your home, but you have also made a home here. You have changed my empire for the better. Before Minho could respond, his communication device chimed. It was a message from his mother in Busan. Minho, ya, I saw the news about the institute. I'm very proud. Are you eating well? Send pictures. Minho smiled and typed back a quick reply. Then he looked at the Emperor. I'll need to think about it. Talk to my family. But Your Majesty, thank you for not throwing me in the pit of shame when I destroyed your throne. Thank you for showing me that my throne needed to be destroyed, the Emperor replied. Sometimes we need to break what we thought was unbreakable to build something better. Later that evening, Minho stood on the balcony of his quarters and looked up at the sky. 2 moons hung overhead, neither of them Earth's moon. In the distance, ships came and went from the spaceport, carrying people and goods and ideas between worlds. He thought about his mother's apartment in Busan, about the streets where he grew up, about kimchi and Korean winters and all the things he missed about Earth. He also thought about his students asking questions about human biology, about Yuna's excitement over her research, about the Emperor's comfortable chair and the way the Vorthan children called him Teacher Minho. His communication device chimed again. This time it was from Ji-won. Dinner tonight at the new Korean restaurant in the diplomatic quarter. They finally figured out how to make kimchi in Vorthan gravity. You're coming. Minho smiled and sent back a confirmation. 6 months ago, he had arrived on this world expecting to fail. He had been a diplomat with allergies, weak by every measure that mattered to the Vorthan Empire. Then he had sneezed and shattered a throne, and in doing so, he had shown an entire empire that strength came in many forms. That being different was not the same as being weak, that sometimes the smallest, most unexpected actions could change everything. From somewhere in the palace, he heard children laughing, Vorthan and human voices mixed together. The sound carried on the wind, full of promise and possibility. Minho took a deep breath of the alien air, felt his nose tickle slightly and smiled. He had found his place in the galaxy after all, even if that place had been achieved by sneezing.